Tom DeWeese is one of the nation's leading advocates of individual liberty, free enterprise, private property rights, personal privacy, back-to-basics education, and American sovereignty and independence. Tom is a businessman, grassroots activist, writer, and publisher. He has always held a firm belief in the need for all Americans to preserve their constitutionally guaranteed rights. He is founder and president of the American Policy Center, a grassroots organization dedicated to the promotion of free enterprise and limited government regulations over commerce and individuals. Tom is the editor of the DeWeese Report and author of the book, Now Tell Me I Was Wrong. Tom has been with us before. Let's welcome back to the Global Freedom Report, Tom DeWeese. How are you, Tom?
Doing well, Brent.
Glad to hear that. It's been almost 18 months since you were last on the show here. How would you characterize the changes that you've observed in the United States over the last year and a half, specifically with respect to the government's attitude towards the American people and to the people's willingness to take a stand against the encroachments of Big Brother?
I think government has gotten more arrogant, it's gotten bigger, it's gotten nastier, more determined to keep all of us in control, and they don't like out much.
Hang on, Tom, I don't know if you're talking away from your phone, but can you talk into it?
I have to change the headset.
Yeah, because you're sounding really, really soft.
Hang on just a minute.
All right, hang on just a minute.
Is that better? Does that work better?
All right, go ahead, talk again.
Does that work better?
Oh, yeah, that's 1,000,000% better.
Okay.
Now, would you again answer that question, please?
Yes. I said I think that the government has gotten nastier, more arrogant, more determined to control every aspect of our lives. They don't like it very much when we talk back and kind of revolt to what they're doing. But we definitely things have gotten worse over the last 18 months. However, also in that period of time, particularly in the last 7 or 8 months, issues that we're working on that I think are really the root of a lot of these things that the government's doing and it's got people upset. We are seeing people begin to stand up, to fight back, and I am astounded by what is going on across the country in that respect.
Well, that's interesting. My producer, Lee Parker, has come up with a phrase, if you will, that we're more and more adopting, which is the pushback movement, that people are pushing back, finally, because they basically had enough. And
yeah,
I think that's to a large degree what you're saying. Ron Paul, we call him the Patriot Congressman, has been calling Obama and much of Congress criminals and calling the U.S. government a dictatorship. He certainly hasn't minced words. Do you think that's just campaign rhetoric? He wants to be president, or do you see truth in Dr. Paul's characterization?
No, I see truth in it. I mean, we have a Constitution that is to be the law of the land, and every single one of those elected officials take an oath to say that they will defend that Constitution. And then when they get in office, Nancy Pelosi has come right out saying, well, what's the Constitution got to do with it? What do we care about that? And they say it over and over and over again.
It's just a goddamn piece of paper.
That's what she said. That was George Bush that said that, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah. And, and again, that just proves it's not a Democrat thing, a liberal thing. It's both sides that this darn Constitution gets in their way, to all these wonderful things they want to do to us. And, Ron Paul has been, ever since I've known him or known of him, has been the one in Congress who stood up and said, it's the Constitution, stupid, and has demanded that they adhere to it. So it's not campaign rhetoric on his part, that's for sure.
No, my own personal view is that, like you say, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Therefore, those people in government who disregard the Constitution are outlaws. They're outside of the law. Outlaws! Hey!
That would be correct.
Makes sense to me, absolutely. On June 9th, Obama signed Executive Order 13575, thereby establishing something called the White House Rural Council. a committee that includes a couple of dozen cabinet members, basically includes an entire cabinet. Now, what does this executive order purport to do, and why is the cabinet a part of this council?
And the Secretary of Agriculture is the chairman of this council. What they say they are working to do is coordinate and increase the effectiveness of federal engagement with rural stakeholders. And they go through a whole list of who those are: agricultural organizations, small businesses, education and training institutions, healthcare providers, telecommunications service providers, research and land grant institutions, law enforcement, state and local and tribal governments, and then they go on and add non-governmental organizations, all this regarding the needs of rural America. Apparently the White House has found out that rural America is in great need of massive government control.
Wait a minute. What you're saying, I mean, it sounds like, hey, they're trying to help out rural America. Why do they need the entire cabinet, though, to do that?
Yeah, I mean, this includes the Department of Veteran Affairs and Homeland Security. We've talked many times about Agenda 21 and sustainable development and what Al Gore calls the wrenching transformation of America. And this is probably the most aggressive thing that federal government, the White House in particular, has done to move that agenda along. You're talking here about federal control of every single action that takes place. They have focused on rural America here, but if you go further, it talks about coordinating efforts with urban areas as well. So to say rural is kind of a misnomer here, but there's been a huge effort underway over the last several years to control the food supply, the identification of animals, following animals all the way from their birth on, right down to even if you have a horse and want to ride it off your property, you've got to go tell the FDA about it. And people say, why? What is the problem here? Why do we need to do this? And you don't get a satisfactory answer here, but what we're looking at is control.
It's the law.
Production and,
it's the law. That's why you got to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's what this Rural Council is really all about. And if you start to break it down, this whole talk about rural stakeholders, people think, well, that means farmers, landowners, people who live there. Our experience has shown that stakeholders are nothing of the sort. Stakeholders are private organizations or members of private organizations like the Sierra Club and the Nature Conservancy and the Audubon Society and a horde of other local and national organizations that have a particular political agenda, and they are moving to put that agenda in place. And what this executive order will do is it will feed money into their hands. They haven't gone into the specifics yet of what they intend to do, but I'm just going by past experience. Well, they will.
Hang on, let's take a look at that, because I know you've put out an urgent call opposing the executive order. Okay, but I actually read the order, and for example, here. The declared mission of the Rural Council, according to this executive order, and I quote, is to better coordinate federal programs and maximize the impact of federal investment to promote economic prosperity and quality of life in our rural communities. Now, you've been in Washington long enough to be able to translate that into English, because it sounds innocuous enough. It sounds, well, gee, that seems like a darn friendly thing to do. What does it really mean?
How do you coordinate? That's key. How do you coordinate? What does that mean? And then, of course, they mentioned all these different organizations. I mean, telecommunications, what's that got to do with, growing crops or whatever? What they do is they come up with grant money, and they feed that grant money through at least a federal agency. And in this case, we've got 25 of them. Those federal agencies will hold this money. They will feed that out to specific stakeholders, organizations, people with a private agenda. and they'll put that money in their hands. They will then take that money and begin to use it to pressure local governments, chambers of commerce, what have you, to impose specific rules and regulations. And when they begin to put those rules and regulations in place, then you've got to comply to it. You will have farmers that will have to fill out endless paperwork. You will, and if they don't comply to these things, which one of these 25 federal agencies are now going to come down and send agents in, are going to have fines, fees, so forth, other paperwork these guys have to do. They can actually vary it.
Don't forget the SWAT team.
And every one of them's practically got one. I'm not sure the Veterans Administration does, but almost all of them do. And so this is the most heavy-handed move by the federal government to move in and control an area that I have ever witnessed.
That's quite a statement, considering the heavy-handed statements the government has engaged in. Now, what exactly? Now, you've made a comment that this is promoting the UN Agenda 21. First, can you refresh everyone as to what the point of UN's Agenda 21 is, and then how is it that this council is in some way in bed with Agenda 21?
Well, Agenda 21 was first introduced in 1992 at the UN's Earth Summit. It was signed by George H.W. Bush. That led to Bill Clinton putting together the President's Council on Sustainable Development, which was designed to interpret Agenda 21 into federal law and regulations. And that's been picked up through state legislatures that have passed specific legislation, specifically comprehensive development plans required of communities and that sort of thing. And then the local communities have been forced to have their city councils or county commissioners put these plans in place. And what it has led to on the local level, it's led to control of water use, control of energy use. It affects population control. It affects your ability to use energy as you choose to. Smart meters being put on almost every house in America now, where they control the temperature in your home and how much water you can use, so on and so forth. That's how it's moved down. And a lot of people are denying that these kinds of programs come from the international level. They all say, well, this is local. This is local people doing it. We can trace it from Agenda 21 down to this. It's very clearly mapped, very clearly discussed in those programs.
And many of those local programs have received federal grants.
And that is the way that that's the poison. First of all,
you want that money, you do what we tell you.
Exactly. You have these NGO organizations. They are on an international level. They are people. When you hear about these huge meetings that the UN puts together, these NGOs dominate those meetings. They come together and they write documents which eventually emerge into treaties or other documents that world leaders sign. That's what brings it into the local or national level. And so now you have the government bureaucrats on the national level who have to write legislation, and who comes in and helps them do it but the same NGOs who help them write that legislation, maybe write it for them, and then they're involved in the state legislature, and then they eventually are involved in the local government and pressuring them to take this grant money and do it. And when they do, the grant money has massive strings attached that you will have to do things the way we want them done. And that's how this poison sifts down from the UN down into your local community. And it's very, they try to hide it, where its origins are, but that's what it is.
Now, and you spoke of the stakeholders mentioned in this Rural Council executive order. And I've heard you talk about associations and companies and corporations and Sierra Club and all that stuff. What about how will this executive order affect farmers? I mean, like family farms, which are part of the foundation of our cultural heritage.
Well, part of the sustainable farming process is very strict controls on water use, on any kind of chemicals that they might need to use to help grow crops, energy that they have to use to do that. That would include driving your tractor. And and they have very specific rules on how crops are grown and sometimes on what kinds of crops can be grown. All of this leads to higher prices. It leads to shortages. It leads to sacrifice. We're seeing higher prices on food now, and a lot of that has to do with these sustainable farming practices. And it even goes down to how the products, once they're taken to market, are wrapped. The entire process is controlled by these policies. And you ask the question, why? Why would you do this? What is the reason for putting all this together and making things so difficult? Well, everything is based on the idea of cutting our carbon footprint to prevent global warming. All of it is based on that. And and that goes from Agenda 21 all the way down. So, the idea is that you literally are cutting back on human society, anything that would affect the environment, which of course is literally everything.
But the other thing is, though, you were saying that money is going to be given to these stakeholders, like organizations like Sierra Club, for example. But what about the farmers themselves? Does this executive order provide some kind of aid or assistance or relief to rural farmers? That's where America comes from. It comes from not the companies doing the farming, but the families who did them.
They say here in the executive order that this will help coordinate, and one of the groups they list is agricultural organizations. There is the Farm Bureau that does try to fight for farmers in many cases. I have been in other cases where the Farm Bureau actually was doing the wrong thing. So it depends on where they come down on it. But anybody can stand up and say they're an agricultural organization and that they're just trying to help the farmers and so forth. One of the excuses that they use a lot they have the comprehensive development plans, and then they work to supposedly preserve the farmland, by giving them tax breaks and that sort of thing. But actually, what happens when they do that, again, these plans are kind of controlled by these environmental organizations, and they're getting paid to help the farmer put these programs in place. But what it really means is that the farmer has lost control of his land.
Well, and that's kind of what Deputy Donut in the chat room just said. He said farms will turn into cooperative.
Yes, and very, very much so. Yes.
Yeah. Now, what's the practical upshot of this executive order if it goes unchallenged? And what I mean by that is, how will most Americans experience its effects, if at all? You have suggested this order affects more than just rural communities. Can you explain that? What is the full scope, and are people who are in other parts of the country going to feel or experience the effect of this order?
Well, yes, they are. And again, you've got 25 of the most aggressive federal agencies in the country involved in this, and they've already proven in the past how aggressive they are. The Department of the Interior, the Park Service, and the Forest Service, and these sorts of places that have run farmers off their land in the West, and then of course in the communities, the whole Smart Growth program that is stopping the development outside of certain areas, doesn't build roads and so forth. I mentioned the controls on water use, the controls on power, and the smart meters and that sort of thing. You'll see more and more and more of this put into place. It literally means that people who own private property will have absolutely no say about what happens on that property. I've been encouraging people around the country when they go to their city councilman trying to oppose some of these programs to ask them one question. Just answer me this one question. What can I do on my property without your approval? The answer is nothing. And this just continues to make it stronger.
Okay, the obvious question. How do we stop it? How do we combat these efforts to rule by executive order? And that's kind of my question of the day. How would you suggest curtailing the use of executive orders to expand federal power? Same question. How do we stop it?
Well, Congress has the opportunity to stand up against these things and not fund them, first of all. An executive order basically is an order by the president to his staff, which would be, the whole administration, all these different departments and so forth. They can, in the past, they have not been able to issue an executive order to tell you and me what we're going to do. And now they're beginning to stretch past that, where that's what they're doing here. But essentially, an executive order is just the president sending out a memo to his people on his staff saying, here's how I want to run my administration. And so Congress has the ability to stand up and say, no way, Jose, you're not going to do this. This is overstepping your bounds, and we're not going to fund these programs. And what we've been calling for is people to get a hold of Speaker Boehner and demand that he stand up to this. And I mean, here they are in this massive, titanic battle to stop massive funding on the federal level. Where do they cut the budget? For gosh sakes, we can't find any place to cut the budget. Well, here's one to start with. This is creating a massive new bureaucracy, and they can nip it right now. And I suggest that everyone contact their congressman, and particularly contact Speaker Boehner's office, and tell them no on Executive Order 13575.
Now, I want to segue off to another thing that Obama just signed for a moment, because, and I don't even know if you're familiar with this, so I may be blindsiding you, but Obama just signed something called an executive memo. Not an order. It doesn't have a number to it. An executive memo that essentially is granting amnesty to illegal invaders if they join the U.S. military or attend U.S. schools. Now, this is an end run around the failed DREAM Act that Congress did not pass last year. Are you familiar with the memo, and would you know if an executive memo, if the same rules apply as an executive order?
I'm not familiar with that. I have not heard that.
Apparently this just happened within the last few days. And what the memo says, basically, he is telling prosecutors, and he is telling law enforcement, he's saying, exercise prosecutorial discretion. And what that means is, since you have the choice, don't prosecute. That's what it means. Exercise prosecutorial discretion if the illegal is or has been or is going to go to a U.S. school or will join the U.S. military. That's essentially what the memo said.
Now this is just so it's a real result of what has happened with a Congress that has not taken up its own responsibilities and has let the president, past presidents, not just this one, but past ones, kind of do what they want to do, particularly with these executive orders, and not challenging them on it, just letting them get away with it. And so now they're getting this arrogant that pretty soon he's going to get a scratch pad off his desk, send it out, and say, "Here's the law of the land." That's what Paul Begala said. Sign a little piece of paper, and it's the law of the land. How cool! And that's what they've come to. And I've never heard of an executive memo. Me neither. Until I think it was yesterday, it came across my desk. I've never heard of this. I figured you might have, because you've been in the heart of the beast for a while. Yeah, I haven't. But that's just how arrogant they're getting. And we run into people now when we try in various communities stand up to Agenda 21 policies in the community. First of all, they call us liars and tinfoil hat wearers and all that. But then they just say, and I had a congressman that represents my area tell me, yeah, you guys are going to run your protest, you're going to do what you want to do, and fine, and we're going to do what we want to do, and we're going to pass this. And the arrogance of these people, it is very rare that anybody has stood up to them and tried to stop what they're doing. And they may know that our side goes out, protests, carries signs, makes some phone calls, and then goes home. And then they're free to go ahead and do what they want to do. And they're used to that. And that's the one thing I love about what's happening particularly with the Tea Party movement, is that they're not going home. They keep expecting the Tea Party movement to go home. And instead, the more arrogant they get, the more they ignore these people, the angrier they get and the stronger they get. So, I think that's the positive side of it.
And since government never knows when to stop, inevitably government continues to squeeze tighter and tighter and tighter, and more people have had it as a result, and more people will have had it As a result, and they're starting to push back. That's exactly what's happening. How do people learn more about the American Policy Center, and how can they subscribe to the DeWeese Report and get your book?
Go to our website, AmericanPolicy.org. We've got about a 15-year archive of articles I've written on all these issues on there. And so it's AmericanPolicy.org. You can subscribe to the DeWeese Report there, and my book is available. It's on Amazon. If you want to go that route, you can order it from our website. Excellent.
Tom DeWeese, thanks so much. It goes real fast when we're talking, but thanks so much. I look forward to having you back again at some point in the not-too-distant future. Tom DeWeese has been my guest. www.americanpolicy.org. Do you also still have DeWeeseReport.com?
We do, yes.
Good. Let's give them both that. We'll put them both on our website. AmericanPolicy.org or DeWeese, DeWeese, DeWeeseReport.com. Tom, thanks again. Keep up the great work.